All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here and welcome. My name is Norm Gottrin. I'm the managing director for the NSF AI Institute for Societal Decision Making at Carnegie Mellon. I am not the star of the show today. Today, I'm grateful that we have with us for this next installment in our Carnegie Library series, Dr. Ron Yurko. And today we're going to be exploring a different kind of high stakes decision making in the world of sports analytics. And Dr. Yurko is an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Statistics and Data Science at Carnegie Mellon, and he's also the director of the Carnegie Mellon Sports Analytics Center. He's a real expert in machine learning, in data science, in real-world settings. Not only is he a teaching professor at CMU, but also has expertise in the world of finance and sports analytics. And he's a real, what I would say, statistics enthusiast. He has not one, not two, but 3 degrees in statistics, all from Carnegie Mellon. And so we're so glad to have you here with us today, Ron. Please take it away.
Okay, so just quick background about myself. One of the reasons why I'm giving the talk about sports analytics. So as Norm mentioned, I have 3 degrees from CMU. I did get real world experience in between there at various points. But one of the things in my past that I did, I was part of an internship group with the Pittsburgh Pirates back in 2014. And I'll discuss kind of the relevance of that in terms of sports analytics in the city of Pittsburgh. And done some various work through organizations, a company called Zealous Analytics, which was acquired by a group, Teamworks, working with lots of rich data that I'll talk about today to try to help decision makers for various professional teams, and still do some consulting work now. So thinking about sports and data. Sports and data have gone back together since the beginning of sports. All right, so I'm just showing you this little picture here of box score from a newspaper back in the late 19th century, literally stats that are being recorded by about describing players, for teams to figure out who are the best players, who should they sign, who should they trade for. People were always using data to make decisions and try to collect various statistics. Out of curiosity, how many people are familiar with the story of Moneyball? All right, I see hands going up. So there was the book written by Michael Lewis back in the early 2000s. And then, of course, there was a movie, Oscar-nominated movie, starring Brad Pitt in 2011. And the premise of this was the Oakland A's were using statistics to make better decisions about which players. And they were finding inefficiencies across Major League Baseball, where other teams were not valuing on-base percentage, even though it was as of an important statistic, if not one of the most important statistics in baseball. So they were using stats to make better decision-making. And Moneyball itself is it's not as much of a baseball book as much as it was a business book of understanding data to help make better decisions. And the impact of this, though, was other teams found out about this story, and baseball itself has become synonymous with the use of data for better decision making. And this has passed over more so across various sports. And one of the big reasons for this is just the growth in technology that we have, and more data that are being collected at every moment. So I do want to mention Pittsburgh. It has a very rich history with sports analytics. So back in 2013 was the first year that the Pirates had made the playoffs in a really long time. And so the Pirates, there's this book that chronicles this, where they were using data for better decision making about where to place players on the field. So the internship that I had in 2014, I was part of this group that was chronicled in this book, where what I would have to do after every game, every morning, is I would sit there and rewatch the video of a game from this bird's eye camera angle. And I would manually annotate on this field, where was everybody at the moment the ball was thrown? Where was everybody at the moment the ball was either making contact with the bat or crossing home plate? where was everybody at once the ball was hit into play, and then the ending outcome. So seeing literally, I was doing the manual data collection of players moving on the field. And then from that, we can infer how much distance did they travel? What speeds were they able to move at? I was creating this manual data that the Pirates were really able to exploit and figure out what was a better way to shift on the field. And this was one of the big data success stories that the Pittsburgh Pirates had back in the day. And the Steelers themselves were actually at the forefront of using data and analytics. In 2014, they had hired a Carnegie Mellon professor, decision scientist, Karim Qassam, and he worked as effectively a quantitative scout. He was someone that he was using data and making decisions to evaluate players, and he was in the room talking to Coach Tomlin, giving his assessments, giving the GM assessments about which players to take. He was just treated like any other scout. So they were actually one of the first teams to have this full-time quantitative analyst. It's hard to think of now, given how things have gone in recent years. But they were at the forefront back then. And the Pittsburgh Penguins, they were also one of the leaders in using analytics in hockey. So back in 2015, and pictured here, they had hired another former CMU professor, Sam Ventura, and he was someone he came up through CMU, stats PhD and whatnot. When he was finishing his PhD, he ended up consulting for the Penguins for a couple of years, and so he is a two-time Stanley Cup champion. And then since he had went on and worked for the Penguins full time, helped build their group up, and has now been with the Sabres. But the Pittsburgh Penguins, since the hiring of Dr. Ventura, have been one of the leaders in hockey analytics. So there's a lot of rich history of our Pittsburgh sports teams really embracing what started in Moneyball and trying to build off of that for themselves to make better decisions. Now, historically, I would say like the traditional view of sports, especially in this window of time where the Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers had success, was looking at maybe we had some window of time during a game. And we have at the beginning of a basketball possession, right? It's March Madness. So in the basketball game, a team gets the ball and there's a starting score, right? A team has X number of points, and then some period of time passage, a possession ends, and maybe a team scores more points. And we think of having a starting value and an ending value. And the traditional view of sports data analytics in this Moneyball window of time really thought about, all right, we have these chunks of time, and then we observe differences. And then we think about how do we credit what happened over those chunks of time to individuals involved. Now, baseball is a really easy example of this, and data I'm showing you here is actually coming from our Carnegie Mellon softball team, where across different base out states, so on the left-hand side in baseball, softball, what I'm showing you is, you could have runner on first base, runner at second base, runner on third base, both bases, all three bases, no one on base. You can have all these combinations of runners on base, but you can also have the number of outs. So there's 24 states in a baseball, softball game. And then what we could do is for each of those different states, we can compute on average how many runs score starting with this situation until the end of the inning. All right, so the real basic one is, if we start with no one on and no outs, we're expected to score fewer than one run. All right, so initially a team isn't expected to score. And then maybe the batter hits a double, meaning now we go to second base. And so we go from a situation where we were under one run to now over one run. And then we could attribute the difference in the value as just take that 1.29 minus the 0.69, and then that's the value of the double that was hit. And this was the very basic idea that's been prevalent in all of baseball and softball, and it's a really easy way to set things up. And people have tried to carry this over in other sports, thinking of what's the expected success of a shot attempt. Right? Did they make a shot attempt or not? And what could go into the probability of a team winning a game? These were very common types of ways we were using data to understand what was going on. But, and that's just me highlighting this, I didn't realize I had the red boxes popping up there. So this idea, though, of a starting state and ending state is a real oversimplification of sports. Right? There's a lot of movement and action that goes on in between. Right? It's not just we have a start and end. We have players constantly moving all throughout. And so what this coming from now, after this little wave of time where the Penguins, the Steelers had success, we've been in the past decade in the era of what's called player tracking data. So if you look at this play, this is just a common play in American football. This was running back Saquon Barkley, who at the time was on the New York Giants. He's running, he's moving, players are trying to hit him, they're trying to tackle him. This happens all the time in football. No, there's no sound with this. It's just it's just an animation. Yeah, none of the videos will have sound. But so what you're seeing here is just a regular play, but what's going on behind the scenes is there's chips in the shoulder pads of every football player on the field. There's also a chip in the ball. And so at every 1/10 of a second, we're observing the movement of all the players, how fast they're moving, where's their literal precise location on a field. So the top panel is a dot representation of that play. Literally seeing Saquon Barkley, who's highlighted with this circle, as he's moving across the field. Where is he at? Where is he located? How are all the other players reacting and moving near him? And then the bottom is just a feature that we can observe over the course of the play, where we're looking at the Barkley's momentum. So given his weight and the velocity at which he's moving, what momentum is he taking towards the target end zone? And then based on the players that are around him, if they enter within that radius, we see highlighted portions that we can maybe connect to, are they slowing Saquon Barkley down? And this has led to us trying to figure out maybe we can do a better way of coming up with a new tackle statistic. Rather than just the subjective label of, this person made the tackle or not, we could use changes in the observed movement information to credit certain defenders with halting ball carriers more than others. Right? So this type of data dominates sports now. This is what we are constantly working with. We have this type of data, not just in football, we have it in basketball, we have it in baseball, we have it in soccer, we have it in hockey. NHL teams also have a chip in the back of the jersey. It's slightly off center, and it marks where are the players at on the ice. It's being picked up by signals within the rink. So very rich information that's constantly being generated. So just to give you a sense of like what this data looks like, literally I'm giving you a table. Like if I open this up in Excel, what is the spreadsheet for the data? Every row corresponds to a fraction of a second for an individual player. So this is incredibly rich amount of data. And this example I'm showing you here, I'm just going to think of one example touchdown run from some data we had many years ago, where this player who conveniently played for the Steelers last year, when he was a wide receiver. And so literally, we would have a row of data for every single person at every 1/10 of a second. So you have 22 players on the field, every play. This data accumulates. Right? This builds up a massive task then for teams in the league to figure out what do we do with all this information? How do we make it useful in various ways? So the example table I just showed you on the previous slide, this is what that play ends up becoming, is you see this touchdown by this ball carrier on the top here. Yeah, does this pointer work? That doesn't show up on the screen. This player gets the ball, becomes a circle in black, carries off, and runs across all the way to score a touchdown in the end zone. So we can imagine then like thinking of, well, what's going on at different moments throughout this play? And where do we think this ball carrier is ultimately going to end up scoring a touchdown? Right? Is there some moment that really stands out? And so what we end up trying to do and what teams will work on is coming up with a whole framework to break down every single moment of a football game. So you can imagine all of these different steps at the beginning of a play. Is it going to be a drop back or is it going to be a running play? Given it's a running play, where does the ball carrier end up on the field? Can you predict how many yards they will gain? If it's a drop back, what does the QB do? Do they throw the ball away? Do they attempt to pass? If they attempt to pass, who do they throw it to? Given that they throw it to somebody, does that person catch the ball, or does the defense intercept it? Or do they try to run? Do they get sacked? There's all these different pieces. And what we have to do is we try to model all of these different things. And it ultimately ends up leading to this idea of let's just predict once someone has the ball, where are they going to end up on the field? And so we tried to maybe at different moments figure out where could somebody end up on the field. And what I'm showing you here is the result of using a deep learning model to try to estimate where do we think, given at this moment, where will be the ending yard line that this ball carrier could end up at. And now the caveat to this is how we predict where they could end up on the field is a hard problem. And this red line, if you're watching this, it doesn't feel like an ideal thing, actually. It kind of feels like, I'm always just kind of estimating this person to maybe gain 10 or so yards from where they're at. When I really should be thinking about, well, what's the chance that someone tackles them right where they're at versus the breakaway probability that they go all the way and reach a touchdown? So instead what we do, and this is what teams are working on, is thinking about, well, what's the probability of ending up on different parts on the field? And so if you're observing this here, I have a red line showing every single yard line. There's a chance that the person gets tackled at that yard line. And so there's a lot of red intensity around the ball carrier, especially at the beginning of the play. But if you notice the end zone here on the left-hand side, it gets darker red, more red over time, and that's this touchdown probability. Right? And so the line that I had on the previous slide, it was always kind of like in the valley. It was never something that was likely. It was just like the average type of situation that we might see, but it was never something that was a highly probable situation. And so instead, what we have to work with is thinking of modeling these whole uncertainty of where a player could end up on the field. So this type of data, one of the things I'm just trying to get across from this is it's incredibly rich and it requires very sophisticated statistics, machine learning techniques to ultimately get at something that could be meaningful for the teams. And so when I say meaningful, we try to come up with like a stock ticker-like value to say within a play, what is the chance of different things happening and what does that tell me about the value of events that take place? And so we have, in football, there's ways of looking at things of like the expected points. So at the beginning of a play, just given where they're at on the field, on average, how many points would this team expect to score? And so at the beginning, given the field position, they were expected to score 3. But over the course of the play, obviously it gets to a point where this person ends up rushing all the way to get a touchdown, right? And you could think of, well, what are different moments, different movements by the ball carrier that were great value? Like he made a certain cut, dodged a certain defender, and that really led to a high, big swing in providing value to the team. And then also thinking about it in terms of win probability here, where at the start of this play, the team was losing. But over the course of the play, where it became likely that they were going to be scoring a touchdown, they were going to take the lead. And so even before he scores a touchdown, within the middle of the play, we now think that this team's going to win the game because he's making this great run and he's going to keep advancing. So this was, we're trying to get at what's the value going on, not just the starting state and the end state, but that wibbly wobbly line in between, right? Where things are changing all throughout within the course of the play and coming up with little micro actions, micro events that we can attribute value to. All right, so there's so much amounts of data that are being collected in this way and across all sports doing a very similar type of problem. Now, the other thing I want to mention is this type of data is actually, it's not just the nerds sitting there working in their cubicle farms or whatnot, and they're not talking at all to coaches or scouts. They're just, on their own. This type of data work that's gone on in the past 10 years has really pulled the data scientists, the analysts, closer to coaches and scouts. And so the two animations I have for you here are comparison to two. One is a current Pittsburgh Steelers receiver, DK Metcalf. So on the left-hand portion here, this was a GIF from when he was with Ole Miss in college. DK Metcalf, scouts would say, is someone known for very much running straight speed. When he gets the ball, he's like a robot. He's just going to run in one straight line. In comparison, George Pickens, who was a former Pittsburgh Steeler, when he gets the ball, you have no idea what he's going to do. All right, he moved around, he was bouncing around, and this clip shows it. He's shifting, he's bouncing, he's turning and whatnot. So these were two very different styles of players in terms of what they did once they had the ball. And so what could be of interest is, how do we measure a player's ability to change the direction in which they're moving? All right, and so historically, this would be done with looking at drills. Right? Go to the NFL Combine and think of, all right, you're going to run in some pattern. A coach is going to be there, and they're going to time you. They're going to hit a stop watch and whatnot, and they're going to say, oh, they did this, and wow, this is their time. But it's an unrealistic setting. Right? These are athletes who, in reality, they're moving on a football field with pads, with all of these players around them. They're not running in a tank top and gym shorts and then just trying to do these drills on a turf field. It's a completely different environment. But we have that tracking data. And so we can think of, well, how do we take this idea and put it in game? And so fortunately, the PhD student that did this, who's actually sitting in the back corner, Kwong Wen, what he looked at was, how about we define based on the tracking data, we look at the shifts in the movement. So we could have maybe like a step a player takes from one moment in time to another, and then they take another step. And then we have an angle between their movements. And so we look at, well, how much does that angle between successive movements in time, how much does that vary? How much does that change? And does that differ between players? So this requires relatively sophisticated statistical technique. And what I'm just showing you here is the output of this effectively as a ranking. And so the players at the top here, these were the players who were not displaying shiftiness. These players at the top, once they had the ball, they're effectively running in one direction. And conveniently, DK Metcalf, for the sample of time of data that we had, he was the least shifty player after he had the ball, right, of wide receivers that we had. Now on the bottom here, these players on the left-hand side are the shiftiest. And conveniently, George Pickens, during this window of time of data, was the shiftiest player, the most change of direction that we observed in the sample. So we can only wonder if we had the least shifty and the most shifty on the same team at one point in time, but we never got to find that out since the Steelers traded George Pickens. But yeah, so the question I asked was like, are there other factors like thinking of, if it was on turf or the weather, whether the game was indoors versus outdoors, that could be impacting this? And potentially, I can't remember if we looked at that. I'm looking at you in the back. No, I don't think we did. Yeah, but it could be something to explore down the road. But yeah, it's absolutely true that you can imagine, well, how a player might move could be impacted by whatever the weather was. Right, if they're playing in a wintry game, that's going to impact like the speed at which they're moving, right? So these type of things should definitely be accounted for in some way. Yeah, great question. But again, like this is just to illustrate to you this idea of this is a trait. This is not me saying that this is the statistic that you need to rank players by. No, this is how can we objectively measure something that coaches, scouts, we're always looking at, but they, maybe in game, they're just subjectively saying what it is. And maybe they're using a stopwatch on drills to try to define and measure it. But now we can measure it within game. Right? We have this amazing amount of data to define that. And so this has pulled then these analysts that are working with teams closer to scouts. There's the Moneyball movie division that you might have seen if you've seen the movie. It doesn't really exist anymore. It's really a lot of teams, they have cohesion on better decision making, working together to blend these two. Now, we're not just limited to this type of data. The next decade of sports analytics is really defined by what I'm going to call posed skeletal data. So there's no sound with this video, but I'm going to show you what is the worst play in the history of baseball. All right, by far, the worst play in the history of baseball. But what you're seeing from this worst play in the history of baseball is the type of data that teams are working with. So again, Worst play ever. The third baseman throws the ball to the first baseman, and for whatever reason, the Pirates' first baseman didn't step on first base. He tried to run the batter back to home. There's no reason to do this. None. No logical explanation whatsoever. And what ensued was ridiculousness. But what's going on here during this ridiculousness is there's cameras all around the baseball field. And so this recreation and these bad video game graphics is the data that's being generated at fractions of a second. We just don't know a spatial XY dot of where players are at. We know where their head is, their elbow, the shoulder, their kneecaps, their ankles. All of that is being gathered at every moment of time within baseball games. Right? So literally this animation showing the arm swinging, those are data points. Major League Baseball teams have access to all of these data points from every game. So they're trying to figure out, well, what do we do with all of that? How do we build new measures of statistics based on all of that? Maybe we have their elbows when they're laughing there as well. So this is the next decade in sports analytics. And I'm just showing you this snapshot on the left-hand side of an image of a swing by Shohei Ohtani, where they literally know, well, during a swing, where is the bat at during a swing? Right? Where is his elbow? What's the angles? All these different measurements that you have. In basketball, we have this information as well. And this is an animation showing you various different players taking a free throw attempt. So we could literally quantify differences that basketball players might have in how they move during a shot attempt. Right? So using, this is massive amount of very rich raw data. And we have to be able to leverage all of these different types of techniques, statistics, machine learning, AI techniques, to somehow convert that raw data into actual, actionable insights. How do we extract meaning from this in some way? So we're in a whole new era now where we thought the player tracking data was big data. We've just escalated beyond that. Because there's so many more data points for every player that's being gathered all the time. We're trying to figure out then, well, what are meaningful patterns? Maybe we could do a better job now of knowing, how a player is moving and how their knee might be moving over the course of the play. Can that actually help us predict injuries, right? Or understand what could be leading to injuries? But then also think about what are the most optimal types of movements. And baseball is this great example where baseball, they've had access to this type of skeletal data for a little while in what they would have these pitching labs. So baseball teams have high-speed cameras that pitchers would work in. And it would be literally picking up then where are their elbows at in certain parts of their delivery, right? And maybe should their feet be placed differently and how they're landing their foot relative to where their arm is. What is the most optimal, what's the most efficient movement? Working with biomechanics experts. And so MLB, fortunately, they've actually been releasing summaries of this data. And so back in May 2024, what they did for the public was they released measures of the bat speed. So over the course of the swing, how fast is the bat moving, as well as the swing length. From the start of the swing that they define, they measure how long was the swing, how many feet did the bat travel. Now this measure that they come up with is based on how they define the end point is either when the bat makes contact with the ball or the nearest point at which the bat misses the ball. And then that's how they're defining this length of the swing, as well as at that point where it makes contact or the nearest point where it missed the ball, what is the speed of the bat at which it's moving. And then MLB tries to create these various new metrics where they come up with this notion of the squared up rate. So historically in baseball, we've had for a number of years, what was the exit velocity? How fast was the ball traveling after it was hit by the bat? This is a very popular thing that gets reported. If you watch a Pirates game, O'Neal Cruz is constantly saying, they're always picking up on, O'Neal Cruz hit the ball 110 miles an hour, right? That's his exit velocity. And so what you can imagine is, well, given the bat speed and given the observed exit velocity, you have a physics model to say, well, did that bat speed that they have, was the observed exit velocity close to the theoretical maximum that could be observed? and that could be a way of defining what was really solid contact. MLB just came up with a heuristic of it's greater than 80% of the theoretical maximum. Yeah, was there a question from? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So who's collecting the data? Now, the leagues themselves, they have technology partners that they're working with. A company called Hawkeye is one of them. But the data is getting stored by the league, right? They're using some company's technology that's been made available to gather those data points. And the thing that's interesting too is like the technology, these companies that exist, Hawkeye, the example I have, that also is the one that if you watch tennis matches, tennis tournaments, the instant replay of where the ball is at relative to the lines on the court of if it was in or out, that's the same camera system technology. Right? And so it gets ported over because, it works well here, and now we're going to take it and put it over into this setting. And American football, NFL, they also now have this camera technology, where the big motivation this past year was, if you watch closely, they no longer are actually moving the chains to mark and measure if it should be a first down. They have the camera system that literally picks up the ball, wears it out on the field. And that's where they're determining should it be a first down or not. Now, with that camera system, we also have the skeletal data of all of the athletes on a football field. So the league internally, NFL teams actually don't have access to this yet. They're soon going to get access to it. They know where are the hands at of offensive linemen at every moment of time. Do you have a question? That's a great question. I don't know the exact like measurement error on like the skeletal information. I will say that the chips, it could be off with literally within a yard or so. All right, so it can be noisy. So we do like a smoothing process to try to hopefully filter things out. But this is one of the reasons why there has been a chip in the football for a decade. And the public didn't really even know about this, but they never used the chip in the ball to say if it should be a first down or not because of the inaccuracies of the measurement. So the camera system is far more accurate, right? And it's amazing how many cameras they're using to really pinpoint these locations. Yep. So with this, there's all of this different information, but I like this example as a way of thinking of, we're collecting so much information and data now, and it could be really tempting to go, all right, big, massive amounts of data, throw it into sophisticated computational tools and tell me who are the best players. But we still need humans in the loop with all of this to think carefully about what's going on, think carefully about what exactly is being collected. All right, so this visual I'm showing you here, what this is saying is, so in baseball, I should have included another video. In baseball, there's this question of when you're facing a two-strike approach, fans will come and say, a batter should change their swing. They should shorten up their swing. So they should grab the bat higher up in the handle, and it will make it easier to make contact with the bat to prevent themselves from striking out. And so what we could do now with this data on swing length and bat speed is say, well, is that true? Right? We never actually knew what was the swing length of batters. What I'm showing you here, this bottom part of the plot, this is the bat speed for a batter, relative to their own average, hence why this is centered around 0. So when a player takes a faster swing than they usually do, it's further along the right-hand side. If they take a slower swing than they usually do, it's further on the left-hand side. And what we're looking at is how does this distribution of bat speed for swings differ between if it was squared up versus if it was not squared up, how MLB was defining the squared up measure. And what you can see is, well, according to this, there's very similar, right? That very faster swings and versus tend to actually have, swings that were squared up tend to be slightly faster on average, even though there's a lot of overlap here. But one could naively look at this and go, well, there's no trade-off, right? If you're regardless if you're swinging fast or slow, you're going to make equal types of contact. So if that's being said, since the advantage is slightly higher average here for squared up, maybe we should just always swing faster. And that's a very naive simplification of what could be going on. And one of the lessons in statistics that we think about is does correlation imply causation? No, it doesn't. And with this measurements, and this is going to be the case with all these new types of data that we're gathering and observing, is where do these measurements actually happen? And so this swing length bat speed example, as I mentioned to you, these swings, you could have someone taking the identical baseball swing, but the bat speed and swing length that get recorded will differ depending on how the batter made contact or missed contact with the ball. If their timing, if the batter was just fooled by a pitch and they were really early, the measurement will be, oh, they took a longer swing and they took a faster swing. They were able to get the bat further out. But if maybe they reacted really slow, they faced a pitcher that throws over 100 miles an hour, it could be literally the same type of swing, but the measurement would say, oh, it was much shorter swing, much slower bat speed. So what this means is we can't just look at naively the raw observed data, the raw observed swing length, the raw observed bat speed. We have to think of, well, how does it cause what we might expect to see? Right? So we think in terms of potentially these causal relationships that could exist. And naively, could I say, oh, swing length and bat speed cause whether or not a batter squares up? Well, I know that's not true because it could be confounded by things. Right? So knowing that, oh, the batter timing, whether or not they're picking up on pitches, that's going to affect these measurements of swing length and bat speed and affect then whether or not they could square up with the ball. Right? So even in this era that we're working with massive amounts of data, we still need to slow down our thought process and know, well, where is this data coming from? How is it being collected? How is it being measured? And we can be very careful with that analysis. And we did this analysis where we do try to adjust now and control for these factors to get a sense of, oh, as it turns out, slower swings and shorter swings are associated with higher contact but lower power. Right? So there's a trade-off that could be at play there. Yeah, question? Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great tie-in to, what is the next event on April 16th? Yeah, to answer the question, so teams are looking at a lot of data about college football players to figure out who they should take. There we go. Sorry about that. Is it working? It just fell off the clip there. So teams are working with lots of different rich information about college football players to figure out who they should take. And one of the things that teams have had access to now, that tracking data I described for the NFL, coming from chips in the shoulder pads, based on using AI computer vision techniques, we can turn any broadcast of a football game into similar type of data. Right? The ability to, from the video feed, literally extract where are players at on a field and convert it to that type of data. And so there are companies that have been selling NFL teams for many years now that information, because to NFL teams, that is their ultimate source of data to figure out who are going to be who's going to be their next quarterback, who are going to be their next wide receivers, defensive stars. So they're using and building statistics off of the very rich tracking data. They're taking advantage of this idea we talked about of change of direction. They're defining it using the actual college football tracking data. They're not just limiting themselves to the combine that takes place every year. And this is, in recent years, there's been a de-emphasis actually on teams in the combine. Fewer and fewer head coaches and GMs are even attending it because they know historically now we can get lots of more data points and better decisions made by what's going on in the game, the setting that actually matters, right? And so in the Senior Bowl that takes place every year, they're actually wearing the shoulder pads that have the chips in them. So the NFL teams for the Senior Bowl, which is another event that they're trying to pick up and find who are the best players, they're using that to their advantage of knowing, oh, now I know exactly what's the speed he's moving at in these plays.